Hello everyone, I'm Diana Rivas and I would like to introduce the following research: linguistic anxiety effects on UNER's English language students' willingness to communicate orally in English language. Today we will be focusing on the following contents, which are going to be Chapter 1, the problem, Chapter 2, theoretical framework, Chapter 3, methodology, and the content number 4 will be procedures to be followed during this research. In that sense, we will be starting with the first chapter, which will explain the problem. And first, we would like to focus on the context in which this following research will be carried out. The context will be the Universidad Nacional Experimental Simón Rodríguez, in which they've been offering the following career, which is called Education in English Language. And within this career, the subject phonetics and phonology has been also offered as an important um, aspect of the whole career, which will help the student to further develop his or her abilities in order to communicate successfully in English language, which is the main goal of one of the main goals of this career. Within this context, we have noticed a significant problem which has to do with linguistic anxiety. It is more and more evident with all of the new studies in psychology and learning and teaching psychology that a student will better learn in a space in which he can be free of anxiety, and that way learning and acquisition of a second language would be more effective, and these students will feel more willingness to communicate, more uh, a more comfortable sensation when it comes to communicating orally, which is not currently happening within this subject. And in this sense, we have then arrived to the general objective of this research, which will be evaluate the relationship between the UNER students' levels of foreign language anxiety and their willingness to communicate in English language. For that, some specific objectives have been established, like discover the levels of linguistic anxiety experienced by the UNER students, then identifying the UNER students' levels of willingness to communicate, and then determine if foreign language anxiety in English language affects the UNER students' willingness to communicate. The justification for this study would be that we will be identifying an EFL problem that can be easily unnoticed, because it is not common to notice anxiety for teachers, since it is a cognitive aspect, a more affective aspect. And also, researchers and language teachers can benefit from this study because it will provide an overview of the levels of anxiety and the effects in the willingness to communicate in English. And also, it will provide an international instrument that will be adapted to the Venezuelan context in the language anxiety field, and will facilitate the teaching of English language in different Venezuelan educational establishments by identifying the foreign language anxiety um, and in the classroom and its effect in their students' willingness to communicate. As for the theoretical framework, we have first of all English as a foreign language, as Barnes' 2005 status. Multilingualism has been largely taken into consideration, and more research regarding this matter has been taking place lately. And English as a foreign language can also be defined as a language that is used outside the country. And as that is the case, learning a foreign language could also include several learning difficulties, such as the fact that the students are hardly using the English language and they lack an environment in order to practice it. So, therefore, we have noticed that linguistic anxiety is a significant matter, and at the very beginning, we had that general anxiety was identified and was also defined as a sense of discomfort and worry regarding an undefined threat. But then linguistic anxiety was also identified, and it was defined by, for example, Horowitz and Cope, 1986, by saying that it was a distinct complex of self perceptions, beliefs, and feelings, and behaviors related to classroom language learning arising from the uniqueness of the language learning process. It is in this sense that they also recognize different types of anxiety, and among all of those types of anxiety or linguistic anxiety, there was also the one that has to do with performing tests and the fear of failure, and also communication apprehension, which was an individual level of fear or anxiety associated with real or anticipated communication with one person or uh, many people, according to Richmond and McCroskey, 1998. And in that sense, we have that willingness to communicate can be also defined as the will or preparation to be part of a discourse at a particular time and by using a second language, as McClintyre and Gardner 2007 said. Also, it is said that it's different communicating in the first language than in the second one. And also, uh, this willingness to communicate has to do with communication contexts, but it could actually be also understood that the effect of the lack of willingness to communicate can also be an important and terrible part of the student as an English language, because they won't be able to establish and master their speaking skills and cultural skills, for example. In that sense, we have Rogers' humanistic approach, which states that um, we have that the they take care way much more for personal emotions, and also the professor is not just a giver of information but also a facilitator of a process, and also the affective elements of language learning must be taken into consideration, and English as a foreign language issues should be treated more from a psychological perspective than from a linguistic one. As for the previous studies that were an important influence for this one, we have correlation between anxiety and willingness to communicate in the Indonesian EFL context by Mani Puspika 2018. where they made a correlation study. Also, linguistic anxiety in the English language and the teaching career, strategies to achieve emotionally secure classroom, a case study in a Spanish university, Goni 2019, in which they made an eclectic research, and also anxiety in oral communication of students of English as a foreign language by Lise Kiami E. 20 and 12, where they applied this to also students of the almost the same career. As for the methodology, we will be having a non-experimental design and a transactional causal one, because we will be observing a situation that's currently happening, but we won't be making use or affecting purposely the existing variables. The approach will be a quantitative one, descriptive level, because we plan on describe and understand the features of a reality. Um, Also, the variables we have will be linguistic anxiety and willingness to communicate. Our hypothesis will be a causal one, which will establish a relationship of cause and effect between variables, and our participants will be the students' course in phonetics and phonology of the Universidad Nacional Experimental Simón Rodríguez. Those are 9 students of both sexes and ages between 19 and 35. The limitations of our study will be that the results may not be applied to other contexts, of course. Causes behind linguistic anxiety may not be known within this study, and qualitative aspects may be also needed. Our hypothesis will be a causal one, stating that the more linguistic anxiety, the less willingness to communicate. As for the methodology and the definitions of both variables, we have that the independent variable would be linguistic anxiety, and it is defined as the feeling of tension and apprehension specifically associated with foreign language contexts, including speaking, listening, and learning, as McIntyre and Gardner said in 1994. The dependent variable will be willingness to communicate, the will or preparation to be part of a discourse at a particular time with a specific person or persons when using a second or foreign language, as McIntyre and Gardner said in 2007. And the operational definition would be the foreign language learning anxiety scale, which was developed by Harwitz 1986. Then the operational definition of the dependent variable will be willingness to communicate scale by Makrowski 1992. We have the indicators there, and we will be using both of these scales, these instruments, in order to measure both of those variables, and then using a correlation method by Pearson that will help us to establish the correlation between both variables. We plan on doing that according to this Gantt diagram within the following months. We apply, we will be, we already developed the problem, the general and specific objectives, the justification, the referential framework on January and February. When it comes to the theoretical basis, the research design and type, the research instrument selection, that was made on February. Also, it will be developed on March, and on April, we will be applying the research instruments and analyzing the data. And on May, we are planning to um, analyze the data and get results. On June, we will still be analyzing the results, have our conclusions and recommendations within June and July. Thank you so much for listening. These are the references. and I'm open to any questions.